As I stood in the kitchen, the sound of sizzling garlic and onions filled the air, mingling with the aroma of the roasted chicken I had prepared for dinner. I glanced at the clock. Mark would be joining me for our usual video call in just a few minutes. The house was quiet, save for the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, and it felt good to immerse myself in the comforting routine of cooking. It was these little things that kept my days structured and my mind occupied. "Hey, Sarah." Mark's cheerful voice echoed through the laptop speakers as his face appeared on the screen. I smiled, my heart fluttering at the sight of him. He was in a hotel room, his hair slightly tousled and a hint of stubble on his jaw, which always made him look ruggedly handsome. "Hi, love. How's the conference going?" I asked, stirring the pot and trying to maintain a casual tone, despite the slight ache of loneliness I felt in his absence. "It's all right. Just a lot of boring presentations," he replied, leaning back in his chair. "But I'm looking forward to coming home. I miss you." His words wrapped around me like a warm blanket, but there was an undercurrent of something unspoken, a lingering tension that had settled over our conversations lately. "I miss you too. Dinner's almost ready." "I'll save you some," I said, forcing a light tone. "It's your favorite. Can't wait. Don't forget the wine." He winked, and I chuckled lightly, feeling a flicker of the connection we used to share. But as our conversation drifted to mundane topics, work, the neighbors, and the weather, I couldn't help feeling that our exchanges had become more like friendly check-ins than the passionate discussions we once enjoyed. Just as I was about to suggest we play a game together later, a sudden gurgling noise echoed from the bathroom, cutting through my thoughts. I frowned, recognizing it as the sound of water backing up in the shower. "Oh no," I muttered, feeling a pang of frustration. "Everything okay?" Mark asked, his brow furrowing in concern. "Yeah, just the shower acting up again." "I'll have to call a plumber," I replied, mentally calculating how I could fit that into my evening. "Do you need me to help?" he offered, always the caring husband, but I could sense his fatigue through the screen. "No, it's fine. I'll handle it. You focus on your conference," I reassured him, forcing a smile. After we hung up, I pulled out my phone and dialed a local plumbing service. "Hi, I need someone to come fix my shower. It's leaking," I explained, a hint of irritation creeping into my voice. They promised to send someone over shortly, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Less than 30 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a tall, rugged man standing there, tools in hand and a charming smile on his face. "Hi, I'm Jake, the plumber." He introduced himself, his deep voice sending a shiver down my spine. "Hi, I'm Sarah. Thanks for coming on such short notice," I said, stepping aside to let him in. As he walked past me, I caught a whiff of his cologne, something woodsy and fresh, and I felt a flutter in my stomach. Jake wasted no time, heading straight to the bathroom. As I followed him, I watched him roll up his sleeves, revealing toned forearms that made my heart race. "Looks like you've got a bit of a mess here," he said, examining the shower with a focused expression. "Yeah, it's been acting up for a while now." I thought I could fix it myself, but I trailed off, feeling a mix of embarrassment and attraction as I leaned against the doorframe, watching him work. "I get it. Plumbing can be tricky. But don't worry, I'll have it fixed in no time," he replied, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my breath hitch. As he worked, we fell into light banter. "So, what do you do when you're not dealing with plumbing emergencies?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation flowing. "I'm usually fixing something, but I also enjoy hiking and photography," he said, glancing back at me with a grin. "What about you?" "Oh, the usual, cooking, cleaning, and trying to keep my plants alive," I joked, and we both laughed. The chemistry between us was undeniable. And as the minutes ticked by, I found myself leaning closer, drawn in by his easy charm. I couldn't remember the last time I felt this alive, this giddy. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once, stirring something deep within me that I had long thought buried beneath the routine of my life. I watched him as he worked, feeling a strange pull towards him, a thrill that was foreign yet intoxicating. With each passing moment, I was beginning to realize that this simple repair was about to become something much more complicated. As Jake finished tightening the last bolt on the shower, I couldn't help but notice how his arms flexed under the strain. It was a simple task, yet it felt monumental in the grand scheme of my day. I had invited him to stay a bit longer, the excuse being that I had a few more household tasks I could use help with. But truthfully, I wanted to bask in the warmth of his presence just a little more. "Hey, you wouldn't mind helping me with a couple of things, would you?" I asked, trying to sound casual. I rubbed my hands on my apron, an old habit I had developed over the years. Jake looked up from his toolkit, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Depends. What do you need? I'm not a handyman, just a plumber with a knack for fixing showers." Right, just a plumber," I teased back. "But I think you're more than that. You fix my shower, and now I need some help with the leaky faucet in the kitchen, and maybe a few other things." My voice trailed off, and I felt a blush creep into my cheeks. "Sure, I can help with that. It's not every day I get to play handyman for someone as lovely as you," he said, and my heart raced at his words. We moved to the kitchen, and as he leaned over the sink, I caught a glimpse of the tattoos peeking from under his sleeves. They told stories I was curious to hear. "So, tell me about yourself, Jake. How did you end up in plumbing?" I asked, my voice light, but the question held a deeper curiosity. He leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms. "Well, it's a family business. My dad was a plumber before me, but honestly, I've always loved working with my hands. It gives me a sense of accomplishment, but it hasn't always been easy. I had a rough upbringing. My parents split when I was young, and I had to learn to fend for myself pretty early on." I listened intently, captivated by his honesty. "I'm sorry to hear that. It must have been tough." "Yeah, it was, but you learn to adapt. You find ways to survive," he said, his eyes meeting mine with a sincerity that sent shivers down my spine. "What about you? What's your story?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how much to share. "Oh, it's pretty boring compared to yours. I've lived in this suburb my whole life. I married Mark right out of college. We have a nice house, a nice life. But sometimes it feels like I'm just going through the motions." Jake nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I get that. Sometimes life can feel predictable, but that doesn't mean it has to be. You deserve to feel excitement, Sarah." His words hung in the air like a challenge, and I felt my heart race. Just then, my phone buzzed on the counter, interrupting the moment. It was Mark calling to check in. I quickly answered, putting on my best facade. "Hey, babe, how's the trip?" I forced a smile, glancing at Jake, who was casually leaning against the counter, watching me with an amused expression. "Hey, everything's good. Just wrapping up some meetings." "How's the shower?" Mark asked, his voice full of warmth. "It's great. Jake did an amazing job. He's just helping me with a few other things," I replied, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. "Good to hear." "I miss you," Mark said, and my heart sank a bit. "Miss you too," I said, glancing at Jake, who was now working on the faucet, his focus unwavering. When I hung up, I felt a strange mix of guilt and exhilaration. "Everything okay?" Jake asked, brushing against my arm as he reached for a tool. The touch sent a jolt through me, and I drew in a breath, trying to steady myself. "Yeah, just the usual. Mark misses me. He's been working a lot," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Jake paused, his intense gaze searching mine. "You should do something for yourself, Sarah. You deserve it." Before I could respond, the air shifted between us. It was electric, charged with something undeniable. My heart raced as I absorbed his words, the weight of my emotions crashing into me like a wave. Just then, without warning, Jake leaned in, and in an instant, his lips were on mine. It was a kiss that ignited a fire within me, surprising yet intoxicating. My mind screamed for me to pull away, to remember my vows, but my heart was racing too fast to listen. I felt alive, exhilarated, and terrified all at once. Before I could process what was happening, I pulled back, breathless and shaken. "What did we just do?" I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. The thrill of the kiss clashed violently with the guilt flooding my mind. Jake looked just as stunned as I felt, his eyes wide and filled with an urgency that mirrored my own confusion. I don't know," he murmured, taking a step back, the tension thickening the air between us. "But I can't pretend I don't feel it. You can't ignore what's happening here, Sarah." And there we stood, two souls caught in a moment of reckless abandon, both aware that everything was about to change. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, my heart racing with the memory of Jake's kiss. It felt like a jolt of electricity coursing through me, a mix of exhilaration and dread. I replayed the moment over and over in my mind, each time feeling the weight of guilt pressing down harder. It was a mistake, I whispered to myself, but deep down I knew I was lying. The thrill of that kiss had awakened something inside me that had been dormant for far too long. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, breaking the silence. It was a message from Jake. "Hey, just checking in. Hope you're okay." My heart skipped a beat. I wanted so badly to respond, to tell him that I was thinking about him, but the thought of Mark's face flashed in my mind, reminding me of the life I was supposed to uphold. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the screen. What would I say? "I'm fine, just dealing with a little plumbing issue." In that moment, I realized how ridiculous it was to hide behind such trivialities. I took a deep breath, contemplating my next move. I picked up my phone and typed back, "It was great seeing you the other day. Thanks for fixing the shower." I hit send, my heart racing as I waited for his reply. A few moments later, the screen lit up with his response. "It was my pleasure. Would love to see you again." I felt a rush of excitement. How could I possibly want to see him again after what had happened? But the pull was undeniable. The following week, Jake showed up again, this time to fix a leaky faucet. As soon as he walked through the door, I felt butterflies fluttering in my stomach. He wore a tight-fitting shirt that accentuated his toned arms, and his smile made my heart skip. "Hey, Sarah," he said, his voice warm and inviting. "How's the shower holding up?" "Better now that you're here," I replied, trying to keep my tone light, but my cheeks flushed at the double entendre. I led him to the kitchen, where the faucet was dripping incessantly. As he knelt beside the sink, I leaned against the counter, watching him work. The tension in the air was palpable, charged with unspoken words and lingering glances. "Did you think about our last encounter?" he asked, glancing up at me with those piercing blue eyes. My breath caught in my throat. "I mean, the kiss," he clarified, a hint of mischief in his smile. I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "Honestly, I can't stop thinking about it," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a moment of silence, and I could see the satisfaction in his expression. "Good," he said, standing up and stepping closer. "Because I haven't either." The air crackled between us, and before I could process what was happening, he closed the gap, capturing my lips with his once again. This kiss was different, more urgent, more passionate. My body responded instinctively, melting into him as I lost myself in the moment. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless, my mind racing. "We can't keep doing this," I said, my voice shaky with guilt and desire. "What about Mark?" Jake's expression turned serious. "What about him? You deserve to be happy, Sarah. What we have, it's real." His words hung in the air like a challenge, igniting a fire in my chest. I wanted to believe him, to let go of my fears and dive headfirst into this whirlwind of emotions. I need to think, I replied, stepping back to create some distance between us. My heart was pounding, torn between the thrilling idea of pursuing this connection and the nagging reality of my marriage. I watched as Jake's expression shifted from hope to disappointment. Just give me some time, I added, trying to soften the blow. He nodded, though I could see the frustration in his eyes. I'll be here when you're ready. As he gathered his tools and made his way to the door, I felt a surge of longing and regret. The door closed behind him, and I was left standing in the kitchen, my heart heavy with the weight of my choices. Later that evening, I confided in my best friend, Lisa. I kissed him, Lisa. His name is Jake, and he's the plumber. It felt amazing, but now I'm just confused. I paced the living room, running my hands through my hair, the anxiety bubbling to the surface. Sarah, you need to figure out what you want, Lisa said, her tone serious. Are you happy with Mark? Or is this just a thrill you're chasing? Her words pierced through my fog of emotions, compelling me to confront the reality I had been avoiding. As I looked at a picture of Mark and me, smiling and carefree, I felt a pang of guilt wash over me. But alongside it was a flicker of something else, desire, excitement, a craving for something more. And deep down, I knew that the time had come to make a choice that could change my life forever. I sat at the small cafe around the corner from my house, nervously stirring my coffee as I waited for Jake to arrive. The air was thick with anticipation, and I could hardly believe I was about to meet him outside the confines of my home. My heart raced with both excitement and dread. I felt like a teenager sneaking out for the first time. The sun peeked through the clouds, casting a soft glow on the table, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in ages. When Jake walked in, the atmosphere shifted. He was even more handsome than I remembered, his rugged charm accentuated by the casual clothes that hugged his lean frame. He spotted me immediately, a warm smile breaking across his face, and my heart fluttered. "Hey, Sarah," he said, his voice deep and inviting as he slid into the chair across from me. "Hi, Jake," I replied, trying to keep my tone steady. "Thanks for meeting me." "Of course," he said, leaning forward slightly, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "I've been looking forward to this all week." I felt my cheeks flush as I fiddled with my coffee cup. "Me too. It's nice to get out, you know?" He nodded, his expression shifting to something more serious. "I've been thinking a lot since the last time we saw each other. I can't help but feel that what we have goes beyond just a fling." My heart raced at his words. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound casual, while my insides twisted with a mix of hope and fear. "I mean, I think I'm falling for you, Sarah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're different from anyone I've ever met. You make me feel alive." The intensity of his gaze held me captive, and I found it hard to breathe. "Jake, Before I could finish my sentence, he reached across the table, gently taking my hand in his. "I know this is complicated. I know you're married, but I can't ignore how I feel. I need you to know that." His touch sent a thrill through me, and for a moment, I envisioned a different life. One filled with passion and adventure instead of the mundane routine that had enveloped me. But guilt clawed at my conscience. "Jake, I care about you too, but I'm married to Mark. We've built a life together." "I get that," he replied, his voice softer now. "But are you really happy? I see the way you light up when we're together. You deserve to feel that way all the time." His words struck a chord deep within me. I had been feeling so lost, so invisible in my own life. "I don't know," I admitted, biting my lip as I fought back tears. "I've been trying to figure things out. Whatever you decide, I'll support you," he said, squeezing my hand gently. "But I want you to know I'm here for you, Sarah. I want to be more than just a plumber in your life." Just then, the sound of my phone, vibrating on the table interrupted us. It was Mark checking in. My heart sank as I glanced at the screen. "I should take this," I said, reluctantly pulling my hand away from Jake's grasp. "Of course," he replied, a hint of disappointment in his eyes. I answered the call, putting on a cheerful tone. "Hey, babe, how's your trip going?" "Good, just wrapping up some meetings." "I miss you," Mark said, his voice warm and familiar. "How's everything at home?" "Everything's fine. Just enjoying a quiet day," I replied, feeling the weight of my words. I glanced at Jake, who was watching me closely, his expression unreadable. "Great. I'm thinking we should start planning for a family when I get back," Mark suggested, his excitement palpable. My stomach dropped. "A family?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I think it's time we take that step. I can't wait to share that with you," he said, blissfully unaware of the turmoil brewing inside me. "Yeah, sure. That sounds nice," I managed, my heart heavy as I ended the call. When I looked back at Jake, I could see the tension in his jaw. "That's a big step," he said quietly. "Yeah," I replied, feeling the gravity of my situation. "It is." The silence between us felt charged, and I knew I was standing at a crossroads. I yearned for the excitement Jake offered, but the thought of leaving my marriage behind terrified me. As we left the cafe, I felt the weight of my choices pressing down on me like a heavy fog. That night, lying in bed beside Mark, I could hardly sleep. My mind raced with thoughts of Jake and the kiss we'd shared. The warmth of his lips lingered, igniting a fire within me that I couldn't ignore. In a moment of reckless abandon, I reached for my phone and typed a message to him. "Can we meet again?" As I pressed send, I gazed out the window, contemplating the life I had and the freedom I desperately craved. The moonlight poured in, illuminating my longing for excitement and adventure, leaving me wondering what would happen next in this tangled web of desire and betrayal. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden hue over the secluded park where I had agreed to meet Jake. My heart raced as I approached the familiar bench beneath the willow tree, the leaves whispering secrets in the gentle breeze. I could see him already, leaning casually against the bench, his rugged features lit up in the soft light. The moment our eyes met, a spark ignited within me, a mix of excitement and fear that I couldn't quite shake off. "Hey," I greeted him, my voice a little breathless as I took a seat beside him. "Hey, beautiful," he replied, his smile broadening, making my heart flutter. "I was starting to think you weren't going to come." I couldn't help but smile back, but the weight of my double life pressed heavily on my shoulders. "I just needed a moment away from everything," I admitted, glancing around as if someone might overhear us. "Things have been complicated." Jake leaned closer, his eyes searching mine. "You know you can talk to me, right? I want to know what's really going on with you." A shiver ran down my spine, and I felt the urge to spill everything, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I found myself sharing lighter details about my day, about the mundane chores that filled my life. But each laugh we shared, each moment of connection, made the truth harder to ignore. "Let's talk about dreams instead," he suggested, his voice low and inviting. "What do you want, Sarah?" I hesitated, the question hanging in the air like a fragile balloon. "Honestly, I want to feel alive again." My voice was barely a whisper. "Then, let's make that happen." He reached for my hand, intertwining our fingers. The warmth of his touch sent a rush of electricity through me. I squeezed his hand, feeling a surge of courage. "What about you?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "What's your dream?" Jake's expression grew serious. "I want to build something real. A life where I don't have to hide who I am or what I want." His eyes locked onto mine, filled with a depth that made my heart race. "And I want you in it." In that moment, The world around us faded away. The weight of my marriage, the guilt that had been gnawing at me, vanished as he leaned in closer. Our lips met, and it was as if the universe had conspired to bring us together. The kiss was electric, igniting a fire that I had long thought extinguished. I melted against him, forgetting everything except the way he made me feel desired, cherished, and free. But just as quickly as the moment ignited, doubt began to creep in. I pulled away, my heart pounding. Jake, I can't. This is too much. Why? Because of him, he asked, his brow furrowing in frustration. You deserve to be happy, Sarah. I know, I said, my voice trembling. But I have a life, a husband who doesn't see you for who you are, Jake interrupted, his voice softer now, more pleading. You're not living, Sarah. You're just existing. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. I can't just throw everything away. Mark loves me. Does he? Jake challenged. Or does he just love the idea of you? I bit my lip, the truth stinging. Mark had been distant lately, and I had felt it too. But could I really walk away from a life built on years of shared memories? I need time, I finally admitted, pulling my hand away, the loss of his warmth leaving me cold. I can't keep doing this. I need to think. Sarah, he started reaching for me again. Please, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Just give me space. He looked at me, hurt written all over his face. I don't want to lose you. I turned away, feeling the weight of my choices crash down on me. But I'm already lost, I whispered, the words barely escaping my lips. As I walked away, I felt like I was leaving a part of myself behind, caught between the life I had known and the thrilling unknown that lay ahead. The park faded into the background, but the tumult of emotions, passion, guilt, fear, whirled inside me, each feeling battling for control. I was torn between my loyalty to Mark and the undeniable connection I had found with Jake, and I knew that whichever path I chose would change everything. I stood in the kitchen, my heart racing, as I heard the front door open. Mark was home early. Panic surged through me, a frantic dance of fear and guilt. I hurriedly tucked my phone into my pocket, my fingers grazing the screen where Jake's last message lingered, a simple yet urgent request to meet. I faced the doorway just as Mark stepped in, his expression a mix of exhaustion and curiosity. Hey, Sarah, he called, his voice warm but tinged with an undercurrent of suspicion. I didn't expect to see you until later. Everything okay? Yeah, just working on dinner, I replied, forcing a smile. My heart felt like a drum in my chest, beating loudly enough that I worried he could hear it. He moved closer, his eyes narrowing slightly. Are you sure? You seem a bit off. He took a step forward, his gaze intense. My stomach twisted as I thought of Jake, and the way he made me feel. Alive, vibrant, and utterly reckless. Just tired, I guess, I said, trying to sound casual. You know how it is. Mark studied me for a moment longer, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind. I noticed you've been on your phone a lot lately. Late night calls? Is something bothering you? I opened my mouth, ready to deny it, to brush it off as nothing. But just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket, sending another wave of panic through me. I instinctively glanced down, and Mark's eyes followed mine. What's that? He asked, his tone sharp. It's nothing, I stammered, but the moment felt like a balloon about to pop. I hesitated, the truth sitting heavy on my tongue. I wanted to confess, to spill my heart out to him, but fear gripped me tighter than ever. Mark reached for my phone, and before I could react, he was reading the message over my shoulder. Jake wants to meet. His voice was low, almost a growl. The tension in the room thickened, and I felt suddenly exposed like a deer caught in headlights. Mark, Is this the guy who fixed the shower? He interrupted, his face darkening. What's going on, Sarah? I could see the hurt beginning to shadow his features, and my heart sank. "It's not what you think," I said softly, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. Mark shook his head slowly, his expression a mix of disbelief and anger. "Then what is it? Because this looks pretty damn suspicious." Just as I was about to respond, there was a knock at the door, sharp and insistent. My pulse quickened. "It's probably just a neighbor," I said, but deep down, I knew it was Jake. "Stay right here," Mark ordered, and before I could protest, he strode toward the door. I felt frozen, a silent scream echoing in my mind. I wanted to run, to hide, but my feet felt glued to the floor. When Mark opened the door, I held my breath. There stood Jake, looking rugged and handsome as ever, but now there was an air of tension about him that sent shivers down my spine. "Jake." Mark's voice was flat, but I could sense the underlying challenge. "Mark," Jake replied, his face paling slightly. "We need to talk." I stood there, caught between the two men, my heart racing as the gravity of the moment settled around us like a heavy fog. Jake looked at me, his eyes searching, and I knew that whatever was about to unfold would change everything. "Jake, what are you doing here?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah," he started, but Mark stepped forward, his anger boiling over. "Who the hell are you, and what do you want with my wife?" Jake opened his mouth, then closed it again, a storm of emotions crossing his face. "You don't understand. There's something you both need to know." Mark's brow furrowed. "What could be so important that you'd come here unannounced?" "Because I'm not just a plumber," Jake said, his voice steady despite the tension. "I'm your brother, Mark. I've been gone a long time." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt as if the ground had shifted beneath my feet, leaving me unsteady, caught in a whirlwind of shock and disbelief. Mark's face went pale, and the chaos of emotions in the room reached a boiling point. "Your brother?" Mark echoed, his voice cracking. "You're lying." But Jake's expression was earnest, desperate. "I can prove it. I just need you to listen." I stood between them, my heart racing as the reality of Jake's revelation sank in. I had stumbled into a tangled web of secrets, and now the truth was crashing down around me. I felt lost, torn between the two men, each representing a part of my life that suddenly felt impossibly complicated. As I looked from Mark to Jake, I realized that everything I thought I knew was about to unravel, and I had no idea what would come next.